So let's start. Warm welcome everyone from Africa and beyond. This is the third webinar from the session, the Sustainable Hydropower for Africa, Asia and South America Network. So this webinar is focusing on sustainable, developing sustainable hydropower in Africa. And this webinar is hosted by Bahra University, Ethiopia, and University of Eldoret, Kenya. So to introduce myself, my name is Amara Mazgabu, freshwater ecologist in Department of Fisheries and Aquatic Science, Bahra University. So this webinar, we start an introduction about the network, Sustainable Hydropower for Africa, Asia and South America Network. So Dr. Hector Vera, who is the head of this network, and he is a biologist based in Paraguay, will give an introduction about this network. And then we'll have 4 speakers across Africa. Our first speaker is, our first speaker is Dr. Robin Peterson, who is from South Africa, and he'll give a talk on a simple and effective perspective for river connectivity. And also in the Ruger National Park, our second speaker is Dr. Gordon Breen. He came from South Africa, and he will give a talk on the sustainable hydropower, environmental flows, and fish in Africa. Our third speaker is from Ethiopia, Dr. Mengistu Abate, and he will give a talk on the current status and the future prospects of sustainable hydropower developments in Ethiopia. Our fourth speaker is Dr. Frank Masese, who is from Kenya, and he will give a talk on the current status and the future of fish passage in Kenya. As announced, we have the presenters will have 15 minutes for presentation and 5 questions for question and answer. And you can use the chat button for asking questions and any query. So let's come to the first presenter, Dr. Hector Vera, who is a biologist based in Paraguay, who is the head of our network, Sustainable Hydropower in Africa, for Africa, Asia, and South America Network. So when it comes to his biography, his specific work is the phylogenetic systematics, which focuses on the neotropical fishes. There's also an interest in the aquatic ecology and conservation biology, and in the same time, his work is in teaching and supervising postgraduate and undergraduate students. He has an expertise in scientific collections for study in museums, management, and curation of scientific collections, ecology of continental aquatic environments, fish ecology theory, and methods of phylogenetic systematics. He has published scientific articles in taxonomy with description of new species of fishes from Paraguay and Brazil. And currently, he is researching phylogenetic relationship of the fish of family Calithidae or Soliform is a group of the armored catfish that is distributed from Panama to Argentina and uses some morphological, mainly the osteology and genetics as a source of evidence, mainly mitochondrial and nuclear genes. So, Dr. Hector, I'm looking forward to your presentations. Over to you.
Thank you, Mare. I guess you should. I will start sharing my screen now. Now you can see my screen. Can you give me an okay? Amare?
Yes, can you make full screen?
And now it's on full screen?
Yes, you can start.
And it passed to the next slide, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Works well.
Thank you. So I'll start my presentation about our network, which is called SHAASAN, which is a network of sustainability of hydropower in Africa, Asia, and South America. This is our third webinar of the 2021. And we will focus on the African context about sustainability of hydropower. As Amare said, this is hosted by the Bahir Dar University and University of Eldoret from Ethiopia and Kenya, and is supported by the University of Southampton from the UK. So, SHAASAN, Sustainable Hydropower for Africa, Asia, and South America Network. This network is financed by the Global Challenges Research Fund, which is a fund available from the Academy of Medical Sciences of the United Kingdom. This network, this project started in the 2020 and fully start working on this year by around January of 2021. And it's planned to keep working till the next and also the following years, working with researchers from Africa, Asia, and South America. So my name is Héctor Vir Alcaraz. I am a biologist. I'm from Paraguay, South America, working mainly with ecology of freshwater environments and also with zoology, mainly with theology. Please, can we ensure that we got our microphones on mute? Thank you. And also working at the National University of Asunción and teaching post-graduation in biology. So, which is the context of this project? Africa, Asia, and South American rivers have an immense abundance and diversity of fishes. We got there a nice picture of fishes from Africa on the left, from Africa on the left, from Asia in the center, and from South America on the right. These fishes are mainly from the Congo River, the Mekong River, and also the Amazon rivers, which are one of the largest rivers of the world. These fishes are of diverse range of sizes, as we can see in the middle, for example, from the Mekong examples. And also, they can range and reach importance in fisheries and also from food supply. Which is the context also. Millions of low-income people depend for food for their livelihoods in Africa, Asia, and South American rivers, which is one of the main focus of this project. Freshwater are most threatened ecosystems of the world. One of the main projects of the freshwater ecosystems is the modifications of the rivers by the construction of dams. We know that hydropower generates energy that benefits human quality of life, but also they impact to the environment. How these impacts occurs in the rivers, we see here an example of the fish migration, of the fish movement across the river. The main implication is the barrier that makes the fishes not passing an upstream and downstream movement because of the dam barrier. But there are also another problems as they are killed by the pressure changes and the movement across the turbines. And also the creation of reservoirs lead to the loss of habitat and changes in the natural ecosystem and also in the species composition. For example, we see in this picture on the left that the most common fishes that are migratory and large fishes from South America, for example, of El Dorado or the Surubi, which are large migratory fishes, they are originally in river, but when the river is dammed, they move to another composition of species, as we see that are the below species as the tucunaré and the corvinas, which are more visual predators and also small fishes compared to the others. Another changes that occurs because of the modification of dams is the traditional fishing of the people. We got here a picture on the right when the fisherman captures large catfishes and using wood and other stuff. And also we got in the picture below another kind of fisheries, which is the capture of ornamental fishes, which is mainly using scuba diving. So when the dam occurs, the fisheries and the fish activity of the low-income people also changes. So we got to mention also that there is a regional variation in research capability developing in hydropower context. Most of them are focused on of northern region as the Europe, UK, and the United States. So, but they are not always transferable to developing nations. SHAASAN will grow representation from the other continents and act as a vehicle to transfer knowledge. For example, we got a strong record of collaboration between researchers from the UK and South America. We got some examples here of papers from the year 2018 and 2020. So this strong record of collaboration between the UK and South America, as Brazil and Chile, will work of the focus of transfer from south to south, which is the strategy we want to apply. So we want to apply a strategy of transferring knowledge and capability and also collaborations between Africa, Asia, and South America in a south to south context. So finally, which are the main objectives and aims? So the first one is to improve the sustainability of hydropower by protecting fisheries from which low-income fishing community depends in developing nations. The second is advance an environmental impact mitigation technology and develop more sustainable operation of planning practices in dam construction and dam practices and dam operation. The third is to disseminate the outputs and build research capability to benefit other nations, mainly from the Africa, Asia, and South American countries. Which are the activities we done so far? We got a dedicated web page which is online, and we can see there the whole information about this project. This is online, and we'll put in the chat also for the participants to see how we are working. Other activities done in this year was the webinars from a continental view, making regional perspectives. As I said, this is the last webinar of this year, which is focused on the African context, but also we already done two other webinars. The first one was talking about the South American context. The second one was treating the Asian perspective, and now we will talk about the African context. We hope and we should keep our finger crosses to this pandemic condition can let us to make face-to-face workshops. We planned 2 workshops, one in South America and another in Asia. The workshop is planned to be in Colombia the next year. And we also probably will do another workshop in Asia, probably China or nearby regions. And we want to do a third workshop, which is in Africa, which depends of obtaining more funds to do that. So we should also keep our cross fingers to get additional funds. Who are the participants? Already we got 24 participants across the world, from Africa, Asia, UK, and also South America. Here are the names of the participants. You can see also in the web page who are the participants, and can establish contact with them if you want to. And here is the link of the contact of the project, which is the web page of the SHAASAN. And that's all from my point of view. That's my presentation. Thank you for your attention, and I will look for the next questions and the next presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Hector, for this introduction about the Seychelles Sustainable Hydropower for Africa, Asia, and South American Network. Thank you also for presenting what so far and what are planning to do in the next couple of years. So, any question regarding to the SHAASAN network? Any comments?
I will put the links of our webpage in the chat so people can follow.
The links have just gone into the chat, Hector, so they should be there.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Henry. So any question?
Any question, please write to me, Hector Vera, or the Professor Paul Kemp from the UK. And also visit the webpage. We got a form to apply for any question and more info in our webpage.
So I didn't see any. So I think let's continue to the next speaker. So as I said, we have 4 speakers, guest speakers. So let's come first guest speaker, Mr. Robbie Peterson. Mr. Robbie Peterson is a freshwater ecologist in the River National Park, South Africa. And his research is focusing on a broad range of topics, which include integrated biomonitoring of freshwater ecosystems, understanding the cues and the barriers to the migration of various species, and also understanding and working with an integrated water resource management framework. Mr. Peterson has an MSc degree in geohydrology from the University of West Cape, South Africa. So welcome, Mr. Peterson. I'm looking forward to your presentations on a simple and effective perspective of improving river connectivity in the Kruger National Park. Over to you, Mr. Peterson.
Thank you very much. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
And on the full screen?
Yeah, can continue.
Okay, good day all, and thanks for inviting me to your webinar. It's a very privilege to be invited to your webinar, and I think it's very interesting. So my topic today is not necessarily about hydropower. As the chairman just alluded to, I work for South Africa National Parks, which is the National Conservation Agency in South Africa. And I'm going to give you a sort of presentation just explaining to you about what we've been doing in the Kruger National Park to improve river connectivity and trying to increase our sort of reaches of river that are free flowing in our national parks. So thanks very much. Kruger National Park is the largest national park in South Africa. It's about 2 million hectares, and it's located in the northeastern part of the country. And that's our flagship conservation area in South Africa. The Kruger National Park has about 600 kilometers of perennial rivers that flow from north to south, and the rivers flow from west to east through the park. And there's about 30,000 kilometers of seasonal and ephemeral rivers in the park. And this is just a diagram of the major systems that are in the park. So in the northern region of the park, we have the Limpopo system, and that's sort of from the Olifants River up north. And then in the southern region, we have the Nkomati system, the Nkomati Basin, and that's from the sort of Sweni Sand River south. What's really special about that is that there's two basins which in the park, and that provides us with quite a high biodiversity, particularly fish species in the park. We have close to about just over more than 40 fish species in the park, ranging from iconic species like the tigerfish, yellowfish, some really nice labia species, to our more smaller species, and sort of tilapia species in the park. So we have quite a high biodiversity, not only for fish, but also for sort of aquatic or riverine species, as trees, very nice riparian forest. We have a lot of water birds, macroinvertebrates. Yeah, it's quite a high sort of a biodiverse area and quite prominent in the landscape within Kruger National Park. Just to give you a bit of context about the situation in the park, so on your left-hand side, you'll see these sort of blue areas here. So the rivers all flow from west to east through the park. On the right-hand side is Mozambique. So our rivers are transboundary with Mozambique. Swaziland in the sort of southern region of the park here, and up north it is Zimbabwe is in the sort of northern corner over here. But what these blue areas are here are our strategic water source areas. These are essentially our water factories. So what this means is that these are water generation areas. Those waters will flow through the landscape, which is quite industrialized, a lot of urban and peri-urban environments and big agriculture, before it goes through the park and then into Mozambique, flowing out in the Indian Ocean. In the middle, we have what we call our present ecological state. So basically the rivers that are in blue are in a pristine condition. The rivers that are red are in a quite highly modified condition. On your far right-hand side, this map is what you call our freshwater ecosystem priority areas. And this is a national map, it's on a national scale. But these dark green areas here, these are all high priority areas for fish sanctuaries and fish breeding areas and fish conservation areas. So that's just a brief overview of sort of generally what the Kruger Park is in the landscape with regards to river systems. What's really important about this is that we coined a little term here, one of my colleagues, Kruger National Park, rivers in a sea of dams. So essentially all these little blue specks that you see, those are all weirs, gauging weirs or structures within the river. There are the black dots, those are all major dams that are in the river. And these are quite large dams that are within the basin, in the systems. And the red ones that you are seeing, those are dams that are planned for the future. So we have quite a lot of dams within our basin and in the catchments. And this definitely has an effect on the sort of hydrology. We almost to a large extent don't have a natural hydrology within our major rivers anymore. There's been a lot of habitat change that's taken place. I wouldn't say fortunately, unfortunately, but in South Africa, or at least in this region, we don't really have that such a big hydropower component sort of associated with our dams. But on the Mozambican side, though, Masingir, Kuramana Dam, and Mohammed Major, those are all planned hydropower dams. So just a bit of history focusing back into the Kruger Park. So Kruger Park has been building dams in the park for a number of decades now. The first sort of concrete dam that was built, and there's a lot of earthen dams as well, was in 1931. And I think to this day, there's close to about 53 dams that were built across the park throughout the decades. Most of the dams that were built in the 1960s and the 1970s, but I think South Africa was going through a big dam building era during that time. We built quite a few dams in the park, And that had, well, at the time, sort of in that paradigm, it was more for drought regulation and sort of secure water resources for game at that time. And I don't think the rivers were really taken into consideration. At least river connectivity during that period wasn't sort of buzzword back then. But sort of in the last decade now, SANParks has been quite progressive, or Kruger National Park, in trying to remove a lot of these redundant structures that are within the river systems. So with that, we are trying to also increase our river reaches or lengths of rivers that are free flowing. Over the last 5 years, that became quite a big sort of process and buzzword globally, and we thought that would be excellent for us to try to improve our river connectivity. But what was really great about our little initiative that we took was that the South African Defence Force, we partnered up with them. And basically what the deal was that the South African Special Forces would use these dam removals as part of their training, as part of their Special Forces training, and we would benefit that they would remove the dam or the structure for us, the redundant structure. And so far, for the last almost 15 years, this has been quite a fruitful partnership. Together with that, South Africa has a big expanded public works program, which is a poverty relief and employment opportunity for the youth. And the youth are then employed to rehabilitate the site by removing a lot of the rubble and sort of the remains of the removal. So I'm going to give you just a quick case study on what we did. So this is the Shengwetse catchment, sort of more in the northern parts of the Kruger Park. It's quite a big catchment and it had a good couple of dams. You can see those red dams were there and the black ones. We focused on this catchment because we thought this would be a great time that we could remove most of these structures. We'll try to remove all of them and we actually create a catchment that is free flowing. So I'm going to show you a couple of pictures and a couple of removals that took place within this catchment over the last 5 years. One of the biggest dams that were in the catchment is the Kanidua Dam. We recently demolished that dam in 2018, but a colleague of mine actually did his master's degree on the Kanidua Dam to try to understand what the ecological effects of the dam was on the fish species there. So I'm just going to highlight what is written in bold there, that 19 fish species were no longer found downstream and 13 were absent upstream. So we can see the dam really had an impact on the fishes' movement up and downstream of the dam. In later years, they constructed a fishway on the dam, which we saw some improvement on the dam, but I think with the dam being there, they caused the irreversible local extinction of species. So there was a really nice study just to illustrate the consequences of having barriers within the river system. And this is the dam here. So I'm going to show you a couple of pictures. And I think the first slide I showed you was the actual demolition of quite a large portion of the dam, but they'll demolish the dam in phases. So this, a bit of it was demolished already, but you can see it was quite a big dam that they built there. This was during the demolition. And these are the expanded public works program, the teams that clear up the rubble. So it's quite a labor-intensive process, but yeah, I think that's just the way it is to create the employment. So this would typically take about 3 years to clean up and to get the site into full rehabilitation mode. This is what they'll do is they will sort out all the rubble and all the blocks, and we can recycle this material to use it in building gabions for erosion control or to incorporate into our roadworks in the national park. And this is the dam after the demolition and rehab. You can see it's quite a great improvement in the dam, and it's quite a nice site not to have that dam within that river. It was a redundant structure, served no purpose, so it was really quite nice to see that dam being removed there. And most recently, last year actually, we removed another dam, the Mungano Dam. This is situated on the Letaba River. It's a river over here, sort of in the central region of the park. This was the dam before. So not such a big dam, but this was actually during flood. We had a cyclone during, actually when this picture was taking, it was during a cyclone Eloise that happened last year. but the dam over time just became so salted up. It was there was no board almost in the dam. So this became completely redundant. And I think just about 20 kilometers downstream of this dam, there was another dam, the Engelhard Dam. So this dam was completely redundant and it was prioritized to be removed. The Defense Force again came in with the special forces and they removed the dam. They blew it out in sections. It was quite an exciting demolition. And that was after the demolition. You won't even know the dam was there. And we restored the river connectivity again within that reach of river there on the Letaba River. And this is now the couple examples of smaller weirs and sort of smaller dams that were within the seasonal rivers. It's before, this was during the demolition and after, and this was a couple of years later, after rehab, completely taken away, the system looks back to its natural condition again. So we've been quite successful in removing a lot of dams and rehabilitating the sites to restore river connectivity. For some instance, this is Engelhard Dam. This is the dam that was just about 20 kilometers downstream of the Mineral Dam. So this is quite a big dam on the Letaba River. But in instances where we can't remove the dam, or then definitely fishways are there's an alternative to improve river connectivity. This is the Engelhard Fishway. So you can see it's quite a nice fishway and it works pretty well as well. So it's a nice fishway that was built along this dam just to keep that river connectivity, sort of that process is happening. Over the last 5 years with Dr. Gordon O'Brien, he's a partner of me at the university just up the road from the Kruger Park. We've been demonstrating the application of FishTrack, which is a fish tracking sort of system, a telemetry system that monitors fish movement in real time. The best study of this is we deployed this on the Olifants River about 2 years ago. This is just an example of the sort of network we set up. So this is the Letaba River coming in from the north. This is the Olifants River in the south. It's the confluence here, and the Olifants River flows out into Mozambique on this side and into the Masingiri Dam. So here we're trying to look at fish behavior and crocodile movement and behavior along the Olifants Letaba River and the influence that the Masingiri Dam could have on these fish populations. I'm going to show you a couple of pictures of the tagging. On top here, it's a tiger fish. This is the tag just below the dorsal fin. This is a yellow fish over here, the Labiobaus mariquensis tags, and this is the Labia species, Labia congoro. We put the tag on. Yeah, I think we caught different ones. This is Gordon over here with this one. And at the same time, we were tagging crocodiles, just to look at their movement and behavior, sort of related to environmental stresses such as water flow and quality coming into the park. This is just a few results. This is for the crocodiles. So we tagged close to about 15 crocodiles, males and females, different sizes, and all these are location and data points for the crocodile movement. I think this was about a couple of months period. So yeah, it was working quite well. The system worked quite well, and we could actually see sort of who was moving, who was staying along. Male and females were nesting. Males are still patrolling a lot of the territory, and this is the information that you could get from that. This is the telemetry data from the fish that were tagged. On, oops, sorry. On top is the Congoro species, the Labia species, and you're looking at the activities. You have the black lines and the temperatures there. So if you look at it quickly, you can see with increasing temperatures, you get little increases in activities. There's a lot more you could measure. You can measure time of day, when fish are active. We correlated this with a lot of water quality parameters, flow parameters to see how this could affect the fish behavior, and could monitor this in real time. At the bottom here is for yellowfish, and basically just the concept there to show you that the data we collected was quite useful and informative for moving forward. Some of the big challenges to have, and some that we are very conscious of when thinking about removing redundant structures or dams, is invasive species. So over the last couple of, almost about 5 years now, we've seen an increase invasive species coming into the park. On your right here is the red claw crayfish that came in about 3 or 4 years ago. You have the Nile tilapia that are coming into the system, smallmouth bass, and most recently we're picking up the Pelcostomus species or so in our river systems now. So when you remove a barrier, you don't actually want free-flowing rivers because it will just give invasive species access into the park. So when we are making decisions on removing barriers, we're very mindful of not removing a barrier just to sort of ease access for invasive species. So the way forward, together with our partners and collaborators, I think we sort of in a nice opportunity that we can look at. We can have a system where you can do pre and post monitoring of dam removals or barrier removals in a national park. And I think moving forward, we're going to try and look at improving river connectivity, trying to get hard data for that, improve natural flow regimes, sediment and nutrient dynamics. That's looking at the way forward, and I think we're in quite a nice opportunity with our collaborators, and particularly with Dr. Gordon O'Brien. I mean, he's been quite instrumental in putting these programs together with us. So thanks. I hope you guys enjoyed that, and yeah, I'm free to take a few questions.
Thank you, Robin, for your nice presentation and also sharing an experience of improving river connectivity in the Rugged National Park. Thank you so much. So let's go to the questions. There are some questions in the chat button. So Bela Abisa just questioned, it was good to demolish the dam for the river connectivity. I mean, and also, but how could you manage the already disturbed spawning behavior of the fish and for the native fish user to migrate upstream? There also another another question: how could you manage the mess you created due to the dam demolishing? Let's start with questions.
Sorry, I'm trying to read it in the chat. Sorry, I never picked out exactly the question. Can you maybe just repeat it?
Yeah, the Balaya Bisa is asking the question. Can you see the chat button? Next poll. So the question is, it was good to demolish the dam for the river connectivity, but how could you manage the already disturbed spawning behavior of the fish and restored the native fish usually, migrate upstream?
So we didn't do any restorative work on reintroducing any fish species back up into the reaches. When we remove these redundant structures, we do a pre-demolition. So we'll see if there are any species that, were downstream and couldn't make it upstream, or species that were upstream and couldn't make it downstream. And after the demolition, we'd go back and go and see. And this doesn't happen, over a year. It could take 3 or more years. If you go back to the site all the time to go and see if the species did recolonize upstream or downstream of that removal. So no, we don't reintroduce species again. It's a natural reintroduction or recolonization of that species. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, so the other question is, how could you manage the mess you created due to the dam demolishing?
Sorry, how do I manage demolishing the dam?
Okay, so any other question? Any other question from participants? I think you can use you can raise your hand, write your questions in the chat box.
The audio is bad. I can read the questions. I can try to answer the questions in the chat. Sorry, the audio is bad. I can't. Sorry, I'm just not understanding the questions. I'm terribly sorry about that. I'll try to answer as much of the questions that I can in the chat. I hope that would help the participants. Thanks. Sorry.
Okay, so yeah. Okay, so let's accept some questions. Hector, I think you're raising your hand. Hector.
Yes, sorry, I was on mute. Okay, I was wondering a question for Robin.
Yeah.
It is possible. I saw the picture of the invasive species, mostly fishes and some crabs and other invertebrates. It is possible, or do you think it's possible to remove them from the park? And is you think that would be will have a positive impact to do that?
Yeah, so invasive species, thanks for the question, Hector. So invasive species are quite a big concern for us in the park right now. We know from many studies that it's almost impossible to remove invasive species. They're in the system. Yeah, we're not quite sure how to do it, how to remove them. So at the moment now, we don't actually have a solution to the invasive species within the park. And I don't think, so most of the perennial rivers that you have in the park where the invasive species seem to be entering the park from, sort of in the upper catchments, we haven't removed any structures from those systems as yet, but the bigger systems. I don't think the dams are necessarily removing dams. They caused invasive species to come in. I think they just came in anyway. At this stage, that is something for the future that we're trying to mitigate invasive species in the park right now. Currently, we don't necessarily have a definitive plan. Yeah, we're not quite sure how to do it. Yeah, thanks for that.
Okay. Thank you. You are
You're
on
muted,
mute.
Amari.
Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry, I was muted. Sorry. So, Dr. Miniyellet, can you ask your question?
Okay, thank you very much. This is Miniyellet from Bahar Dar University, working in the same department like Amhara. I'm happy with this webinar. Thank you very much. It is an eye-opening webinar focusing on Africa. So I would like to appreciate the presenter. That's really very interesting work. My question is, how did you manage to bring the South African Air Force on board? You see, it's a problem. And then how you manage to convince to demolish those dams? It's very interesting work. I would like to know more on this issue.
Thanks for that question. I think it was there is a military presence within the Kruger National Park, and there's always has been, because there is border operations between Mozambique and Zimbabwe. So the military was always a presence in the park mostly for border control. But I think the partnership and relationship that the Defence Force and SANParks had was for over decades and for many years. But I think the Defence Force needed a training area for real life applications to train their special forces. And I think just over years with working together with the National Parks and the Defence Force, I think they came up with an agreement or a nice initiative to actually say, listen, we're looking to remove a lot of these redundant structures. They needed a space, an area that was large enough where they could do demolitions, where there was no people around, there was no infrastructure, or they couldn't damage anything or hurt anybody for the operations. And I think it just provided that unique environment for that relationship and partnership to work. I don't think we intentionally went out there and wrote letters to the Ministry of Defense to tell them we needed to do it. I think it was a partnership and a mutual collaboration over many years that we managed to establish that partnership.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for answering the questions, Mr. Robin. So I think you can continue chatting in the chat box. You can ask questions, and Mr. Robin will react on the chat box. So let's go to the second speaker, Dr. Gordon Breen. He is a professional scientist and rated researcher, C2 researcher from the University of Mpumalanga and Rivers of Life program in South Africa. His career vision is to undertake evidence-based research on water resources and their response to multiple stressors for the sustainable future. He has more than 18 years experience in water resource management and protection, ecological risk assessment, aquatic ecology, ichthyology and fisheries, environmental flow assessments, and ecotoxicology. Dr. Gordon has worked in 16 African countries and also collaborate with more than international universities and institutes. He has published numerous peer-reviewed articles and also book chapters in international journals. So welcome, Dr. Gordon. I'm looking forward to see your presentations on sustainable hydropower, environmental flows, and fish in Africa. Over to you, Dr. Gordon.
Thank you again for this opportunity. Can you see my presentation and can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm going to continue. So what I'd like to present today is titled Sustainable Hydropower, E-Flows and Fish and in Africa. And it emanates from two recent publications that we have just had published in 2021. So I'm just going to highlight both publications and then bring up some important relevant outcomes from the study. I will share the presentation, the Dropbox link to the presentation in the chat group afterwards, so anybody can have access to it later. I want to start with a global map of existing dams and, very importantly, the regions of the world that are going to experience the most interest and the greatest development of new dams going into the future, and that includes all of these developing parts of the country. And importantly, from an African context, it includes us. The way that we're interested in contributing to the sustainable management of our resources and trying to get the balance between the development and the building of these dams and the way that the resources are used and, importantly, protected for sustainability is through a vehicle called environmental flows, environmental flow determinations and environmental flow management. So what environmental flows are, they refer to the quantity, timing and quality of freshwater flows and levels, that in particular for lakes and wetlands, that are necessary to sustain aquatic ecosystems. And those ecosystems that are then sustained will then in turn provide and support human cultures, economies, livelihoods and well-beings. So what it is, it's the amount of water, the timing of the water, the quality of the water required to sustain ecosystems. And importantly, one of the important considerations in the context of environmental flows is things such as ecosystem processes and ecosystem activities such as fishes and fish migrations. And we know that our region and in addition to other regions of the developing world, we have very high diversities of fishes, and the rivers that already have connectivity issues are going to have increased dam building, and we expect to get more impacts, but we also know that we have opportunities here to conserve our high diversity of fishes. And you can see this is the central part of Africa where a lot of interest is going into hydropower development. So we want to ensure that we have vehicles in place to help us contribute to the management of the way the water resources are going to be developed, the dams are going to be built, and from a hydropower perspective, what are the potential threats associated with hydropower developments, and how can we contribute to the management of these developments so that not only do we allow sustainable development, but we also conserve the species that we care about. So this is the first, and I'm just going to quickly give you two quick examples about the publications. So this first publication, which is a review of sustainable hydropower in sub-Saharan Africa, and I must just raise that the point of these two publications was really to attempt to establish review and then establish good environmental flow management practice in the context of hydropower and hydropower development in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa. So the first publication included these sections. We reviewed the potential for hydropower in the region, risk and opportunities associated with hydropower, and the importance of sustainable economies, sustainable livelihoods, and then raised the issues associated with sustainable ecosystems. We considered management of water resources and lessons learned from the region. We also reviewed other areas and what they've experienced. We looked at how would you plan and what type of approaches you could use for sustainable development, and very importantly, resource protection. And that's where the fish comes in, is what is it that we're actually interested in? What is it that is vulnerable about the ecosystem that has the potential to change? We then reviewed and considered benefit sharing and trade-off considerations, and then actually doing something with it, not just talking about it and developing policies, but actually putting it into practice. The second publication was really focused on Uganda, and what this allowed us to do was to look at a very interesting case study, which I'm going to review in a moment, which would be very useful for this seminar. So what we considered was water resources in Uganda, small-scale hydropower in Uganda, and considered the difference between side-scale developments and regional developments. We considered these tributaries or these small developments on smaller rivers, compared that to the work that is being done on the Nile, for example. And then we looked at hydropower developments and operations on river ecosystems, and that is where we truly found some issues associated with the protection of ecosystems and what we care about from an ecosystem perspective, and how valuable fish can be as ecological indicators of the environments that we're looking at managing in a sustainable manner. Environmental flows again, hydropower and environmental flows, and opportunities for standardization of methods, approach, and other opportunities in Uganda, and regional integration with existing legislation from other countries and policies. For example, the Nile Basin Initiative strategies for environmental flow management in the whole region that considers sharing across different countries, for example, and looking at connectivity between the lower part of the Nile and the upper reaches where we were. And then recommendations for methods and approaches. So that's the second publication. But what I wanted to highlight here from a protection perspective, and we're going to have the rest of the presentation and also present these good practice outcomes to you, is that from an environmental flow context, and what is it that we're actually changing when you look at hydropower developments and environmental flow management. This is a hydrograph of what the flows look like in a river ecosystem. And what we're trying to highlight here is that the ecosystem, and in this case fish as indicators of that ecosystem, have different requirements for different parts of the cycle. So that's why environmental flow is so useful, because environmental flows don't only consider the volume of water, but it considers when that water is being provided. What is the characteristics of how the water is provided? What are the actual features that require different parts of the water that is being provided? What is the requirement for base flows? What is the requirement for floods? And in a hydropower context, and I'm going to show you this in a moment, the rapid changes in flows can be detrimental to many species. Again, using the requirements of fish as indicators of that ecosystem. So that's really something that we'd like to raise and have tried to introduce with these publications into the way that hydropower is managed. So this is a small example. So while we were working with this on this study, we had the opportunity to go up into Uganda, and we visited some case studies. And while we were there, we had this opportunity to collect some data from this Rimi River case study in Uganda. I'll give you an idea where it is. It's up around the Lake Albert, upper parts of the Nile Basin in Uganda. And on the left-hand side here, I just want to show you that while we were there, we actually observed these rapid, sudden changes in flows. And not only did we observe the changes, but we also observed how some of the vulnerable fishes that occur in that study area are affected. These are adult stargazers and Phyllis genus. We don't know what the species is up there. I think a lot of work needs to be done on what species we have before we can start to consider how we can look after them and use them to manage these resources. And a very important group that we're interested in is the Labia barbus, or the yellowfish. We call them in Southern Africa yellowfish group. These Labia barbus species that have well-documented environmental migration and flow requirements for ecosystem, for cues to initiate breeding and feeding activities and movement, for example. So this was what we found in the case study. And what we wanted to highlight here, this is not from that case study, but I wanted to show you is that what often happens with these hydropower plants that are considered to be run a river is we deal with these sudden changes in flows and flow levels. And we just wanted, through this publication, to show you that you need to consider all aspects of the life cycle requirements and histories of fishes, And when you use them as ecological indicators, they can actually give you information about all of these different requirements. So this is just a picture to show you the rapid changes in flows. This is about 15 minutes apart, and you can see there's a considerable difference between the flows. But what did we find in Ruimi, in Uganda, and what have we presented in the publication? So what happens in this case study is we have about 20 cubic meters of water flowing down a river that has an opportunity for hydropower development with this very attractive head that they can use for the development. So once all the infrastructure is in place, again, you can see there's a head race, a penstock on the turbine that generates the power with the river. But because there's a diversion of water to the head race for power generation, only 5 cubic meters of water would then be allowed over the weir into this dewatering zone, which is not necessarily very extensive in the context of a 60, 70, 100, 200 kilometer river. You know, losing 20 kilometers or 3 kilometers of river may not be considered to be too bad. But the problem is that in itself may act as a barrier. The weir itself may be a barrier that may restrict migrations and movement and the life cycle characteristics of species. But what we found in this run-of river that was considered to be environmentally friendly was when they have rapid changes in power, when the power grid and the ability to generate power stops because the grid trips, they have to immediately stop diversion of water into their head race. And all of that 20 cubic meters of water suddenly then overtops their weir, the diversion weir, and then causes erosive and other impacts down this dewatering zone. But while that's happening, immediately the flows downstream in the Ruimi River stop, and we have a sudden decrease from about 20 cubic meters of water there down to 5 cubic meters per second. While they're trying to then work on the grid and re-establish generation, you can experience this low flows. But what we found then is not only does the system return to its 20 cubic meters per second of generation, when they have the opportunity to generate power again, they need to ram the grid, to energize the grid, so that they can allow for sustainable power production. And to do that, they actually use all of the water stored in the head race and the penstock, and they ran those flows. So we observed that they pushed the flows up to say 38 cubic meters per second. And during that period, they actually reduced the flows during the head race even further. So it really was crazy. And just to show you some pictures and some graphs, you can see that the flows in the river changed considerably. And this is a graph over here to show you what the flows look like. We have this sudden, and this is just downstream of the power generation plant, a rapid decrease in flows, and then these spikes in flows over a few times in one day that we observed while we were there. And you can see this red graph is the associated power generation. So over a long period of time, this is from 6 o'clock to midnight, you can see that they can, and on some occasions they have multiple trips and failures, and they can change a hydrograph and a normal flow period of around 20 cubic meters per second with very subtle changes in flows to this very erratic ecosystem with increases and decreases in flows rapidly. And I just wanted to raise this as an example because we observed that a lot of these developments are considered to be environmentally friendly because they don't consume water. They're not actually using a particular volume of water, but the impact on the environment and the consequences to the fishes as indicators was tremendous, and something that we've raised. So what we did is we through these two publications is we've reviewed available good practice, we've reviewed the potential threat associated with hydropower development, and tried to then propose what are these good eFlows practices, and that eFlows can be a very useful tool to contribute to integrated water resource management for these developments. So the first is, and I'm quickly going to run through these good practice principles that we've included in the publications, and then I'm done. The first is that all stakeholders need to be engaged, and a vision for the balance between the use and protection must be established, because then everybody understands what it is and why it is important to get that balance between use and protection right, and also who is threatened by the developments from a fish and a livelihoods perspective, because often the power is transmitted and transferred far away from the river itself. Ensure that benefits are shared between local and regional stakeholders. Consider environmental flows, which considers a sustainable balance between that protection and use, which I've mentioned. And environmental flows can identify and allow you to discuss these trade-offs between the need to use the resource and then the importance of protection, and why we are going to allow for some utilization and some deterioration of the ecosystem's condition because of the importance of using it. And that needs to be highlighted and discussed so that we can understand why it is that we're doing what we're doing. And all of this needs to be evidence-based so that it can be as robust as possible. What can be attained through environmental flow assessments, and what the balance can look like, and what are the limitations or the restrictions for developments, and to keep it as simple as possible. That was highlighted. Point number 5, this is the last slide. Environmental flow, consider how these goals and applications can be embedded within other policies and existing management frameworks. Consider regional requirements and linkages between the developments in certain areas and downstream users and the Nile River, for example, and how it can contribute to the overall requirement for the management of flows and water in the entire resource, not only local considerations. Important to consider the scale, I've mentioned that. And then this was so important, and this is really something I'd like to highlight from an African context, which is lacking in our area, is that these assessments should be evidence-based, and importantly, we need to determine more flow ecosystem and flow social relationships, flow ecosystem service relationships that we really don't have in Africa, and we really need to put some effort into trying to understand what is it that our ecosystems require. Because often through these assessments, we've seen many case studies where we establish environmental flow requirements, we implement them, and then we don't actually achieve the conditions of the environments that we expected because we didn't understand the ecosystem and the flow ecosystem relationships to start with. So in order to help us with that, we can't not do anything until we generate this information. We need to adopt an adaptive context, or we need to manage this in an adaptive we need to be adaptable. So we need to use what we know now and then have the opportunities to improve our understandings of the requirements and the management of these resources later when new information comes available. Engage with all components. This issue with engineers against ecologists, against these managers, against the people was something that we've identified and highlighted as being something that needs to be addressed. We need to engage and understand that we all need to share and utilize these resources in a sustainable manner. So thank you very much. I'm going to put a link to the presentation and to these two publications in the chat box so that you guys can quickly get access to a Dropbox and then access them. Thank you for the opportunity, and yeah, goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Gordon, for an excellent presentation on the sustainable hydropower in Maroc and in Africa. Thank you for your talk by considering different case studies in the African context. So any questions and comments from the audience?
I have a question.
Oscar?
Yes. Hello, thank you very much for the nice presentation. My question is regarding some rules or norms, hi Gordon, or norms regulating the environmental flows. Do you have any legislation that specifies how to proceed when you determine the environmental flows for the different months or something like that? Are there?
Yes, so look, when you look at all the countries across the continent, I'm sure you can appreciate that they all have different policies and different requirements. But in South Africa in particular, we have very robust legislation where the way that environmental flows are determined, the methods you use, the considerations you need to take, and the outcomes are all a formal part of our legal processes that actually become gazetted and become law. So that is a process that the government undertakes, and it results in this new legislation. The outcomes are legislated, and then we have to adhere to them. They have to implement them with us, and then we all need to adhere to them. As you move north into Africa, a lot of countries have actually adopted Southern African policies or South African policies, so they have very similar ecological reserve, resource directed measure requirements, they call them. But interestingly, some countries like Tanzania and now many of the Nile Basin countries, they are themselves establishing their own good environmental flow practices, methodologies, guidelines, and slowly starting to implement them, and then to start to get buy-in from all of the stakeholders in the region so that they can look towards sustainability. There are some subtle differences, but I think it's been a very useful and interesting vehicle to have this discussion about the sustainable balance between the utilization of resources, water resources, and that includes hydropower and the ecosystem. And of course, people, the social ecosystem service aspect.
Perfect, thank you.
Sorry, Hector?
Thank you, Mare. To Gordon, thanks for your presentation. It was nice to see how you are working in Africa. I'm wondering, because I'm not working in the field of environmental flow, but I have so many questions here in Paraguay about applying an e-flow and study or projects in Paraguay. And I saw that most models are related to salmon fishes. And I see in your pictures that you got some native species are bottom dwellers or suckermouth species, which also we have in other continents as South America. And you or the area you work are still in the phase or applying salmon models, or we are developing and capable of use other species and other environments. Thank you.
Yeah, that is a very important comment. You're right. Globally, the species that are good indicators of the developed world are used by those regions as evidence, and the requirements of those species, our understanding of the biology and ecology of those species are used as evidence to contribute to our knowledge of what the ecosystems require. The danger is that in many parts of the world, they don't occur, those salmonids don't occur in those catchments, and more importantly, in some areas where they do occur, they're not the important indicators of the environment that needs to be protected or maintained or established. So what I highlighted in the presentation, which I'd like to emphasize again, is that we need more information about the biology and ecology and migratory requirements of different species, especially in these developing areas, Paraguay, Africa, and I know I have a lot of colleagues, and we collaborate closely with people in India, in Asia, even in Australia, and in South America, because we understand the value and the importance of characterizing their biology and ecology so we can use it to support our management of environmental flows. So, Hector, I think it's not the case anymore. I can proudly and confidently say that in the last 10 years or so, all regions of the world are using their own species as indicators, which has been an amazing improvement. And we're discovering people are starting to identify incredible new information about fishes and what they can do. And we've got tigerfish catching swallows in mid-flight, amazing stuff. We're discovering what eels can do, incredible things. And you need this information to contribute to your own management of your water resources. And for environmental flow assessment methods, You need the evidence to describe when the water is required, why the water is required, who requires the water in terms of the species. What do the habitats look like? What do the queues look like for flows? What are the minimum depths for connectivity for different species? I mean, the species we're interested in require about 700 mils to maybe a meter. The species you're interested in may require 1 or 2 or 3 meters of water, just to be able to move without excessive stress. And then something I think you alluded to is salmonids are always used for the fish weigh and fish requirements, and that is also changing. We've got a lot of information in Southern Africa, and the rest of the world is also looking for new information to not only determine what the fish need and how to maintain minimum flows, but also to mitigate barriers so that we can start to reestablish some of those populations and those processes. So I hope it helps. And the key here, everybody, the key here is to collaborate. We need to work together more and more and more so that we can help each other. And yeah, we're more than willing to share and to have other discussions about what we're doing. And we hope we can help you with the case studies that you're interested in. We want to learn from you. We're interested in what the Mexicans are doing, by the way. They've got some really wonderful new management work coming out of Mexico, which we're interested in as well. Hope that helps, Hector.
Thank you. It was good to hear that it is possible to work with native species also. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Gordon, for detailed description for all the questions. Let's take one question and we'll continue discussing in the chat section. So, Mark, you can ask a question.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Gordon, for your presentation. Very, very interesting. It's great you finished on the point of collaboration, and it was great for you to refer to the fact that neighboring countries are in discussions together. Who would you say are the primary organizations across Africa who are encouraging that open dialogue of understanding the impact from one river catchment through to another river catchment, perhaps in a neighboring country? Who's the primary organization there? And I think it's an incredibly important part, because whilst for years we've been all reviewing the pros and cons of white elephant, large-scale hydro schemes, what you're looking at in small microsystems and small flows, I really embrace. And I think that we need to look at that, not for the short term, but for the short, medium and long-term sustainability of so many of the areas in Africa. So who is the organization that you would relate to that best enables that dialogue to happen, aside from trade development, which is raising its head across Africa?
So
thank you.
You know what's interesting here is that a lot of these hydropower developers, they don't want to, and they don't necessarily need to take responsibility for the catchment. You know, they've got a development in a particular area, in a particular river, and they only really want to deal with what they're doing. When you start to bring all of the other developments and all of the other stresses together, you start to then need to manage rivers on a regional scale. And that's where this transboundary issue comes in. And what we have here in Southern Africa is we have these transboundary river commissions, these multinational commissions that extend across the Zambezi catchment, the Orange Vaal River catchment, the Nkomati catchment, you know, so they include many countries that come together under a commission to work together. You know, we call them Orasacom and Limcom and Zamcom, for example, and they've been wonderful because they bring people together. Usually one or two of the countries have more experience than others, and they have they support the others generally. You know, you do get this big brother problem where some countries try to muscle the other countries to bend to their whims and things, but I've generally, from our experience, they've been very they've worked very well, and they've used the expertise. They've rather appreciated the experiences and expertise of South Africa, for example, and you can see we're getting opportunities to work in the whole region, and we're hopefully contributing, not just, you know, forcefully pushing our ideas onto everybody else. But then the Nile Basin Initiative has been extraordinary. From you can imagine the issues they deal with, where you've got Egypt and the one end of the catchment, and you've got Kenya and Tanzania and Uganda on another end of the catchment, and all the countries in between, with all the different development positions, you know, how far they're developed and their interests and ideals, and they're all connected by this Nile Basin. And now the Nile Basin Initiative and their stakeholders, because there's other Upper Nile Commission, Victoria Nile Commission, for example, but the Nile Basin Initiative is trying to, from a national perspective, pull all of the ministries and the decision makers together, and then start the discussions, the dialogues, to determine good practice processes. And a lot of what I've presented today comes from looking at and reviewing good practice approaches of these countries in the Nile Basin. And the Nile Basin Initiative itself has got a strategy for sustainable water resource development, which includes a large section on environmental flow management, environmental flow determination. They've also got their own set of good practice methods. You know, I'm sure that everybody is aware of World Bank and the World Bank principles for environmental flow determination, but these stakeholders themselves have come up with their own requirements and their own policies. And they're Africans who understand the African context. And Hector, this comes back to your question, where the Africans who understand the African context make appropriate African policies. Because, for example, we put a lot of emphasis into getting stakeholder buy-in, because it doesn't matter how good your science is, if you don't have the stakeholder buy-in, you're not going to achieve anything. You're not going to be able to implement it, and you're not going to be able to achieve anything. So they're making it very relevant to African context, to the African issues. And I hope that South Africa has a very bad legacy of implementation, where other countries brag that, you know, they're doing a lot better than we are in Africa. And we applaud that, and we hope that they can put pressure back on us to actually start to implement some of these best sustainability practices we have. And then I think just lastly, as a closing comment, is that from a sustainable development goal, sustainability perspective, I think Africa is actually going to achieve the 2030 Sustainable Development Goal agenda, but not because we're so good at managing our resources. It's because we're actually in a developing stage where we haven't utilized them excessively across the continent to result in unsustainable resources. So although we are probably going to achieve sustainability, we need to be very careful in our region. And I hope this is a lesson other regions can learn, is that it's not because we're so good at managing our water resources, and we've got to get better at managing our water resources, because as we develop, we need to ensure that we can also protect and maintain them in a sustainable way. And that's what we do. We're interested in from the little part in South Africa, and Robin's next door, so we work very closely together with our local stakeholders, but we want to support the region. And thank you all for the opportunity again to present this to you today.
Thank you, Dr. Gordon, providing detailed descriptions and also detailed information regarding to your presentations and all the questions. We have more questions, but this time we'll go to the next presenter. You can still write your question in the chat box, and Dr. Gordon will answer that. So let's go to the next presenter, Dr. Mangiste Abate. Dr. Mangiste is from Ethiopia, from Bahar University. He has a BT degree in hydraulic engineering from Arba Minch University, and MSc degree in water resource, water science and engineering, in specialization with hydraulic engineering and river basin management in UNESCO IHE Netherlands, and he has also in integrated water resource management, focused on morphological changes of rivers at Bahar University. So he has worked in various sectors in Ethiopia, including the public works and urban development in our region, Ethiopia, and also Bureau of Water Resource Development. In the meantime, he's working at Bahar University in the rank of assistant professor, and he's also giving lectures and advising postgraduate and undergraduate students in different disciplines. And he has also served in various administrative positions in Bahar University. Welcome, Dr. Mangiste. I'm looking forward to presentations. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you also for giving this opportunity. to share my experience on hydropower, and my talk will be the status and future perspectives of sustainable hydropower development in Ethiopia. It is a review actually. Is it moving?
It's I think.
Huh?
Frozen. You are in the first slide.
Yeah, it is not moving. I don't know why. Are you controlling me or?
No, just I think you better again.
Okay. Yeah, it is stacked actually. Oh.
It's frozen.
Is a problem. I don't know why.
So can I share your PowerPoints from my side?
Let me try once.
Okay.
Yeah, is it coming now? I think.
Now it's moving. Yeah, now it's moving.
Yeah.
Can start from the first slide.
Yeah, this is the title that my talk focuses. This is, I think, just an information. This is the Grand Renaissance Dam in Ethiopia, which gives us some information on the upstream and the downstream, and you can relate what the environment upstream and downstream, and the fishes, the linkage between the down and the up. So my content, I will talk about the world energy, the Ethiopian energy resource, potential and status of hydropower in Ethiopia, and the structure that we need to have power, or that we use for the generation of power. And lastly, I will have some remarks as a conclusion. Just to give you some energy sources in the world, we do have different sources that classified as conventional, unconventional, and from which we do have also renewable and non-renewable energy. Hydropower, it is a renewable energy, and my talk focuses on hydropower. As an information, in the global, we do have different energy sources. When we see the history of this energy consumption, and if we project the US Energy Information project that we will have an energy consumption 50% on the next 30 years. So as you see, renewable energies, that is hydropower, one of it will increase. So the power in relation to hydro is more important in the future. And we do have also, as a resource potential in the world, 30% of the energy that we have comes from hydroelectricity. Yeah, it is well recognized that access to clean, reliable energy is vital for socioeconomic and environmental concerns. One of which is hydroelectricity is important, and it is renewable and green actually. But what are the other advantages this technology offers? Of course, it has also some negative impacts. Some advantages: it is proven, mature, predictable, and price competitive technology over other energy sources, and it has among the best conversion efficiency. That's the water, actually the fuel is water, and 90% of it is converted to light or to wire. It requires actually high investment cost, but it has also a long span with a very low operation and maintenance cost. This makes hydropower is preferable over the other energy sources. When we see some statistics in the world, it contributes 70% of the annual electricity generation. And its annual generation capacity, the IHA, the International Hydropower Association, reported that in 2020, we do have about 4,370 terawatt-hour, and there is still energy potential for the further development. When we see in its statistics, we do have 16,000 terawatt-hour, and from which the economical potential about 9,600 terawatt-hour. Of the technical potential that we do have in the world, for instance, Europe close to 50%, in Asia 24%, in Africa only 6% has already been developed so far. If we see the increment from 2016 to 2020, we do have an increment on average 1.8 growth per year. This is the hydropower, the energy that comes from the hydropower. The regional development also increasing actually. The leading is East Asia and Pacific, and the least actually Africa. We do have in power, and then the power sense, we do have 38 gigawatt, and the energy, it's only about 140 terawatt-hour. Yeah, the energy production and the power that brings to installation, it is increasing. If we compare from 2019, it's increased by 1.1%. It doesn't mean that the energy consumption, the total energy consumption is not decreasing because of COVID. For instance, much of the energy that comes from fuel, it was diminished, and as the general, it was reported 4.5% decline as compared to 2019 as of 2020. Yeah, the leading in the world, the leading country is China, and next that is Brazil. So it is reported that 1,330 gigawatt total hydropower installed capacity that the world has in 2020. Where we see in Africa, actually, the IHA reported Ethiopia is the first in the first country that has much installed capacity. Yeah, it doesn't mean that the other countries don't have much more energy, but they do get in different sources. This in Ethiopia, it is from, yeah, it is only about hydropower that we are using here in Ethiopia. Actually, Ethiopia has energy resources, different energy sources. Much of the resource comes from hydropower. It is about 45 megawatt, and yeah, the data, it seems outdated. It is not updated. But when we sum up the hydropower that we have right now, it reaches 13 to 14%. And the other energy source, wood and agricultural waste, you can imagine how the environment will be affected. So the government is now inclining totally the development of hydropower. Why that is so? Because we do have a topography suitability and abundant river flow, and much 88, greater than 88% of the energy source comes from hydropower. And the study showed that we do have a hydropower energy potential of the country in the order of 650 terawatt-hour per year, from which 160 terawatt-hour It's an economical feasible energy. In the power, we do have about 30 to 45,000 megawatts. As I said previously, very small percentage, less than 40%, is known to be developed so far. Yeah, just as an example, the future perspectives. The red box, that is the Renaissance Dam that's situated. And this section shows the Abai River, which is called in Ethiopia, and the Nile when it reaches Sudan and Egypt. This is a cross section from its start, from the Lake Tana. And you do have an information here. We will have a cascade type of developments. Different dams will come in operation. Yeah, actually, the Renaissance Dam will come in operation after a few years. Then after the cascade type of development, already the sites are identified and the production, the installed capacity as a feasibility study, it is already known. The detailed study, I think, will follow. This is just an information, the next hydropower development in Ethiopia, especially in mountain reservoirs with flow regulation. So dam is here and will create artificial reservoir. Then we need to think about how the connectivity, the upstream, the downstream connectivity should looks like. When we come to some information on per capita consumption of electricity in Ethiopia, it was 22 kilowatt hour in 2001 and estimated as a target scenario in 2025, 84 kilowatt hour. And the report says now in 2019 it reached about 78.82 kilowatt hour. I think the Ethiopia government most likely achieved the per capita consumption when the Renaissance Dam comes to operation. Yeah, 98% of the generation is interconnected system from hydro. Even the planned one also exclusively hydro ICS system. Yeah, these are just to give you an information. The hydropower plants in Ethiopia about 20. It starts the development starts actually in 1932 with a capacity of 6 megawatt, and now it reaches about 6,000 megawatt. All those projects, hydropower projects, either it uses this diversion structure, weir and barrage, and the big one uses dams, concrete dam and earth dams. Yeah, this is the growth potential that the study shows. We do have about 15 terawatt hour per year, and exploitable, as I said, near to 160 gigawatt hour per year. So, start. Amara?
Is it frozen?
Yeah, it is frozen. I don't know why.
Okay.
Oh.
I think it would be better to continue the presentation. I think as we are running out of time, maybe you can use the presentation in your computer without sharing. What I mean is,
yeah,
you are now in the summary section. Yeah. Okay.
It just ran.
Okay, you can come to the summary and the next sections. Yeah, okay.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know whether it is visible for you or not.
It is visible, yeah.
These are the potential sites that already identified. About 300 potential sites are identified in Ethiopian river basin. In summary, the hydropower development has become the focus of attention in recent years in Ethiopia. This is because the government has identified this sector as the primary source to satisfy the energy demand and achieve the country's sustainable development goals. Ethiopia plans to develop 25 gigawatts of renewables by 2030 under its climate resilient green economy initiative, from which 22 gigawatts are hydropower and the rest are geothermal and wind. Yeah, just what type of structure that we need? We do have 4 types of development types: runoff river hydropower that uses weir and barrage and sometimes gap. Storage hydropower, this exclusively use dams, big dams. Pumped storage hydropower upstream and downstream reservoir. It requires gates and dams. Offshore hydro, that is tidal hydropower, from which development type, runoff river hydropower and storage hydropower type may affect highly the fish movement as well as the environment. So focus shall be given for such type of development. The existing large dams in the world are currently used 25% for hydropower, and the rest are for other purposes, water supply, irrigation, and the like. These dams and reservoirs can block fish from swimming upstream, reduce fish population, affect the entire ecosystem, sedimentation, changes in water quality. Yeah, when we see the Ethiopian context on the large dam project, much emphasis were given to the positive aspects of artificial lake, little suggestion on the negative aspects, especially on the fish movement. For sedimentation, water quality, and upstream situations, in the report, we do have mitigation measures. But I found that for fish movement from upstream to downstream, little attention has been given. So the future shall focus on that. At the conclusion, as we have seen from the global perspective and in the Ethiopian context, hydropower will become the dominant source of flexible electricity by 2050. Need of dams and reservoirs is still present, and it will not be exhausted in the foreseeable future. So dam is required, that means. Impact of hydro projects are well understood today, as we have seen in the previous presentation. We do have problems, and we just understood those problems. So appropriate compensation and mitigation measures can be identified. Topographic advantage and abundant river flow suggest that the future sustainable hydropower dam projects of Ethiopia is enormous, and this implies that great attention shall be given for the maximization of the social, economic, and environmental benefit of the country. Of course, we need to give appropriate mitigation measures for negative aspects, especially for this webinar, for fish movement that should give much emphasis. And it could be a point of discussion and a research idea can become. Thank you very much. This is all about.
Thank you, Dr. Manise, for your nice presentation and providing a wide range of information and also suggestions on how to build the hydroelectric power in the future in Ethiopia. So I can accept one question maybe from the audience, and we'll proceed to the next presenter. Any question? I think they can stop sharing.
Okay.
Any question? So if there's no question, let's move to the next answer. Dr. Frank Masise. He is an aquatic ecologist whose research interest is on straddles the terrestrial aquatic domain as seeks to understand how land use and landscape variables shape the diversity and composition of aquatic communities, mainly invertebrates and fish, and the processes that maintain them, like the nutrient cycling, organic matter processing, and primary production. His research draws on multiple disciplines to understand and mitigate the environmental problems and also inform the river ecosystem management and biodiversity conservation for sustainability. Currently, Dr. Masese is a senior lecturer at the Department of Fisheries and Aquatic Science in University of Eldoret. He holds his PhD in 2015 in freshwater ecosystems from the Wageningen University, Netherlands, and also he was a postdoctoral in the Lebanese Institute of Freshwater Ecology and Land Fisheries, Berlin, Germany. So welcome, Dr. Masese. The floor is yours. Over to you. Dr. Masese, I think you are muted.
Thank you, Amare, for the introduction. Are you hearing me?
Yes, you can continue, Dr. Frank.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for the presenters that have gone before me and given good background to hydropower, fisheries, environmental flows, and improving connectivity in South African rivers in the Kruger National Park. So in this presentation, I'm going to talk about the status and future of fish migrations or passage in Kenya, and also give examples from current and previous research, and also I'll draw experiences from other studies in the region. So as a form of introduction is that in Kenya, in terms of the connective hydrological network, we have the history flowing rivers that drain into the Indian Ocean from the Central Highlands, Mount Kenya, and others, and the rest of the rivers that are flowing into the Victoria. Then we have the Rift Valley system, some draining south into Lake Nato in Tanzania, and others draining into Lake Turkana. So in terms of the fishery studies that have been done, mostly in the Victoria Basin, we understand that the Victoria is very important for the ecological diversity, initially hosting over 200 secret species of fishes before the introduction and decimation of secret spinal patch. And most of the studies in the early 30s, 20s were focusing on the lake because of this high diversity. But occasionally studies were done on fish migrations from the lake into influent rivers. So we understand that in total we have around 75 fish species, but some are migratory, depending on this connectivity between the lake and the influent rivers for their life cycle. So we have in rivers around 75 fish species, are dominated by cyprinids, around 20 species, followed by the cichlids. And we have some introduced species, 9 in total. But we have around 15 species that are migratory, and this including the catfishes, the cyprinids, including the critically endangered Labia victorianis, and some other mammalids and the yellows, as Gordon and Peterson have already mentioned. So because of these migrations, river connectivity is very critical. As we have seen in the Turkana system, this is one of the largest desert lakes in the world, dependent on the Omo for its flows. But in the Omo River, there's a controversial construction of the Gibe Dam, which is going to be 250 meters high. And because of this disconnection between the lake and the inflowing river, a number of fish species will be disconnected, and they will be impacted in terms of meeting their life cycle requirements. Then when we talk about the easterly flowing rivers, we have the Tana and the Athi Sabaki Galana system as the permanent systems flowing into the Indian Ocean. And this share species, fish species. We have around 65 species in these two river systems. And obviously we have the cyprinids, which are migratory. We have the momyrids and some indigenous cichlids also. But the Tana particularly has had disconnectivity because of the building of many dams for hydropower production. Then we have the migratory eels, the 4 species of migratory eels that have been studied in Kenya. And these are, I've already mentioned, the Okai, the Tana, and the Atigarana Sapaki system. But the Tana in the mid-reaches has a series of dams, around 7 dams that have been constructed there, and these have really inhibited the migratory routes of these species. They are not able to reach their historical headwaters for reproduction and other requirements. So in terms of the migratory species in the Tana is quite impacted. So by a continuous, currently they study actually on fish migrations on the Athi Garana Sabaki, but because of also dam construction, is that the Athi also is being impacted because currently there's a dam I'm going to talk about that is being constructed in the middle reaches that is going to impact seriously on the migratory patterns of these species. But what we are seeing from previous studies in rivers in the region is that species diversity is very low in the low order streams. When you talk of first, second, and third order, you're talking about less than 5 species, mostly 3 species. And this is important. The diversity of fishes peak in the middle reaches, 5th, 6th order. And these are locations for hydropower, the construction of dams for hydropower generation. So this can inform the construction of dams, as Gordon has mentioned, that although we have many small dams in the region, but cumulatively they may be having a large impact in terms of fish diversity and migrations, because we are realizing that there's a lot of endemism in most of this river system in terms of the fish species that they have, such that if they are impacted with these dams, then the diversity and the livelihoods of many people that are dependent on these species is going to be impacted. So almost all fish species we have encountered, they are in one way or another being consumed by local populations. And the collapse of migratory species in the Victoria Basin was occasioned by the use of specific type of gears like mosquito nets to capture gravid females migrating upstream, and poor water quality also, because actually, as Gordon has showed in the map on the global connectivity of rivers, is that many African rivers have very good connectivity as opposed to other regions in the world. Talk about North America or in Europe. And the greatest danger in terms of fish populations is going to be in terms of water quality, because we are seeing a lot of wastewater input, and also most of the systems are seasonal. So in terms of water resources management, people's livelihoods, these connectivity issues are going to be more critical as we move forward. So in terms of construction of dams, I've already mentioned that Kenyan rivers don't have that many dams in terms of age. Actually, most of the hydropower generation in Kenya is geothermal now, and wind is coming in very, very closely. So in terms of hydropower, we don't have many dams. We have a series of dams I've already mentioned, the Tana system, but others in the other.
Dr. Frank, can you summarize within 2 minutes? Are you with me? Dr. Frank.
Yeah, I'm moving quite fast.
Can you summarize within 2 minutes? We are running out of time.
Yeah, let me do so. So there are planned dams, and these some are in the midst of rivers without fish passages. In fact, most of the dams in Kenya don't have fish passages. This is the current dam construction in the Athi system, as you can see at the confluence of two rivers. But just water intake and spillway, there's no fish ladder in these systems. And I've checked most all dams in Kenya, there's no provision for upstream fish migration. So in terms of fish connectivity, I've already mentioned, one's going to be poor water quality. There's discharge of wastewater, poor solid waste management, and most systems, because of land use change, are becoming seasonal, and with increased organic pollution, the water, the downstream migration of fishes is disconnected. Then the issue of hippo pools, there are many population of hippos in many river catchments. So combined with poor water quality and low flows, we are seeing that in the dry season, there's a lot of reduction in oxygen levels in water, resulting in fish kills. Then this kind of disconnection, because of land use change in the headwaters, deforestation, you will get that base flow conditions become limited for fish migrations. So it's not only dams that are obstructing upstream fish migration, is poor water quality, the low flow conditions during the dry season, and other issues that can be identified. And we talk about, Gordon talked about environmental flow assessment. This is the study in the Mara River, where we are seeing that there's a strong connection between the water levels in the system, dissolved oxygen concentration, and water temperature, and the critical levels that when exceeded result in fish kills. We have been having annual fish kills in the Mara River occasioned by low flows in the system. So in terms of the threats, increasing human population, pollution, hydrological connectivity issues, overfishing and exotic species that I've already mentioned. And we lack also information, as Gordon mentioned, on the ecology and environmental requirement on most species. And we continue to describe new species like this. The first record of Labiobalbas baini in the Victoria Basin was recorded last year, and several other species that have not been described. So previous studies we have done the Mara with Gordon and others. We have tried to determine biotope requirements, habitat requirements for species, and this information is critically needed to obtain flow requirements for this species and when setting environmental flows. So studies on eels in the Addis Ababa system to include more information on the ecology and threats, characterizing the ecology and evaluate contribution to local fisheries and livelihoods. Similar studies are needed elsewhere. So in terms of the knowledge gaps and the future of fish migration in Kenya is that we need studies on habitat use, recruitment, and fish behavior, assess impacts, habitat change, water quality and flow reduction, and river fragmentation, as the need for water for hydropower, irrigation, and other uses are increasing. There are more calls for dam construction. Assessing the socioeconomic importance of migratory species, these are very critical for local livelihoods. And also knowledge about fish passage, performance, and behavior when developing or designing fishways, although this is not a common feature for many dams. And lastly, to emphasize what Gordon said about environmental flow determinations, to address river connectivity and requirements for indicator migratory species. That was a first because in the interest of time, but we can continue discussions on the chat and other avenues. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Masase, for your nice presentation and also sharing the experiences in the Kenyan case studies. So now for questions, I can accept 1 or 2 questions. Dr. Muriel, you can ask a question.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much, Dr. Frank. I'm happy to see you and to see your interesting presentations. Actually, the problems in Kenya, the neighbor, and in Ethiopia is it's almost the same, and we share so many things. My question is, I don't know, how much do you involve maybe the professional experts when you build these hydropowers as a team? So the main problem probably here in Ethiopia is in hydro engineers, others, they will just work and then they will try to tell us like there is good flows and where it's sustainable and the like. So can you tell us the experience in Kenya, how you involve probably as a professional, if you have any groups who are trying to maybe to push these people to work with ecologists and the like. So that's my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minuet, for your question. Yeah, actually, when it comes to any project or development project in Kenya, the initial stages, there needs to be an impact assessment to be done, which involves all stakeholders. And this usually is to mitigate the potential negative impacts arising from such developments. And in this case, for dams, they need to make provisions for the protection of aquatic species and riparian plants, and also the communities in terms of the ecosystem services and goods that they derive from the system. So these environmental impact assessment reports are quite collaborative in terms of the involvement of all the partners and communities. And this is where input is being made in terms of protecting the species in the river, in terms of providing fish passages, for example. But as we can see that, for instance, the current dams that are being constructed, they don't have provision for fish passages. So it means that they are not, some information is being missed in terms of incorporating these sustainable practices in terms of species protection. So I think there is a disconnection because during EIA, sort of environmental impact assessments, which is done annually, they make an effort to incorporate such kind of protection to the system. But once a dam has been constructed and there is no fish passage, then it becomes very difficult to incorporate that in the management of the dam, of the hydropower.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Frank. So is there any other question? Yeah. So we're now at the end of today's webinar, which was focusing on the sustainable hydropower in Africa. If there is anything that we will talk, let me finalize by acknowledging the people who participated in preparing this webinar. So I'd like to say thank you to the hosting institutions, Bahara University and University of Eldoret, for hosting this webinar, and also some of the network members, particularly Jenny Knight and Andre Vols, for creating and continuously updating the Eventbrite page and also collecting information from the speakers. I would like to acknowledge also the guest speakers for your presentations focusing on sustainable hydropower in Africa. I would like to say thank you all participants for attending this webinar and also for your questions and comments, and also your suggestions So if you have an interest to work with us, please contact us with our webpage, what's just shared, and also on the same page that you registered. Thank you so much for today. This is the end of today's webinar. በጣም አመሰግናለሁ። Asante sana. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much
for joining this webinar. Hope to see you again next year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That was interesting. Okay.